Well, let's now get in Brahma Chellaney, one of the country's top strategic thinkers. Brahma, when it comes to the point of view of which of the elections is going to have the biggest impact for India, when the Indian elections, of course, United States we all know about. But which are the other elections you think is going to be particularly critical for us to monitor closely?
I think first let's remember that this year is unusual because the largest number of countries are going to the polls in a single year. And the elections this year are spread across all the continents. Countries that are home to more than half the global population will hold elections this year. They include 8 of the 10 most populous countries of the world. Even in the global south, the key democracies from South Africa and Mexico to India and Indonesia will go to the polls this year. And the outcome of these elections could have a profound impact on our world. Let's start with India's neighborhood. Bangladesh will soon have its general elections. The opposition BNP is boycotting these elections. Sheikh Hasina has given Bangladesh political stability and rapid economic growth.
So in that case, Brahma, I'm going to just go through each of these one by one. So on the question of Bangladesh that you just mentioned, Sheikh Hasina almost certainly coming back, right? Now, there are people who say that there are elements in her government who are close to China. But for India, obviously, we've had very close relations with Sheikh Hasina. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
You're absolutely right, Vikram. Sheikh Hasina is very important for Bangladesh's continued economic and political upward trajectory. Political stability is the base for economic growth. And Sheikh Hasina leads a secular pro-economic growth party, the Awami League, and her return to office will be good for Bangladesh, but also good for the region.
You would not be too concerned, Brahma, about the so-called Chinese influence in Bangladesh with Sheikh Hasina's regime? I mean, I guess most countries in the neighborhood also balance India and China. I mean, she is still seen as being pro-India, and certainly a lot better than the BNP would have been.
You're right. There is Chinese influence right across South and Southeast Asia. There isn't a single country that is immune from growing Chinese influence. But the fact is that in India's immediate neighborhood, US policies are pushing certain countries into China's lap. Myanmar is a very good example of how an independent country that has traditionally been reluctant to become too close to China is now being pushed toward China. Bangladesh is a country that the US under Biden has been targeting. It has threatened to impose sanctions on Bangladeshi officials if the elections are not free and fair, while the Biden administration turns a blind eye to the indirect military rule in Pakistan. Pakistan is also having its elections very soon in February, but those elections are going to be a farce, as Imran Khan has been saying. Yet you'll never hear a single American official comment on what's happening in Pakistan.
Right, I'm glad you mentioned Pakistan. What's your take on, I mean, does India have any skin in the game out there? Does it matter to us who actually forms the government in Pakistan? Or is it more or less irrelevant? The army is going to call the shots?
Whatever the outcome of Pakistan's February 8th election, one reality will not change. The country's domineering military will remain the ultimate hand wielding political power behind a civilian-led government. Pakistan essentially is a one-party state. The only party that has ruled the country directly or indirectly since the first coup in 1958 is the military.
Right. Let me move to some of the other elections, Brahma. Brahma, if I could get your views on the United States election. That's, of course, a big one a little later in the year. Of course, there's been a certain perception, is Trump going to be better for India? Is Biden better for India? And there could be some other candidate as well. How high are the stakes, you think, when it comes to who actually is going to win the election in the United States? Or does it not matter too much for India? There'll be some bipartisan consensus on many issues.
No election this year will have a greater impact on the world than the one in the US on November 5th, when voters elect the country's next president, as well as the entire House of Representatives and a third of the Senate. Biden's poll numbers are already dismal, even as questions swirl over his mental acuity and physical health. A second term for Biden seems increasingly unlikely by present projections. If the weak poll numbers prompt the 80-year-old Biden to drop out of the race, it would not only spark a messy intra-Democratic Party battle over the replacement nominee, but it will throw the entire election into unfamiliar territory. We also have the case of Zelensky, whose term is going to end in March. But the guy says he will not hold the election because the country is at war. Now, Zelensky, as you know, is the poster boy of the West for democracy, but he has banned opposition parties, he has jailed political opponents, shut down independent media outlets, and clamped down on the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And he governs by martial law. And yet, you see, now there's a rift in Ukraine that is becoming more and more visible between Zelensky and the military. By undermining his political legitimacy through refusal to hold elections, Zelensky is inviting the risk of being ousted by the military. For Zelensky, 2023 was a very tough year. But make no mistake, this year is likely to be even tougher for Zelensky.
Right. Let's turn our attention finally to Taiwan, because Taiwan, there's going to be elections out there. Most of the candidates seem to be not very favorably inclined to China. You've been a close China watcher. Again, what happens out there and what's the impact that it's going to have on India?
Taiwan's vote on January 13 will have an important bearing on cross-state relations. China-Taiwan relations, as you know, are already very tense because Beijing has regularized coercive pressure on Taipei. Taiwan has almost as many people as Australia. Australia is almost a continent-sized country. Despite being a small island, Taiwan is a technological powerhouse that plays a central role in the international semiconductor business. A Chinese annexation of Taiwan will not only make China a more formidable economic power, but also threaten global peace and increase pressure on India. And 2024, this year, could serve as an opportunity for Xi Jinping, who's itching to annex Taiwan. He has called the incorporation of Taiwan as a historic mission and he said just a few days ago that this mission will be accomplished. China could ratchet up pressure on Taiwan if the ruling Democratic Progressive Party candidate, Lai, wins. Lai is committed to defending Taiwan's sovereignty. If Taiwan goes, you can imagine what will happen. The next region that China will seek to absorb in the name of quote-unquote reunification will be India's sprawling state of Arunachal Pradesh. So Taiwan's continued autonomous status is essential for India's long-term security.
All right. Thank you so much, Brahma. Before I allow you to go, any other election other than the one that we have been talking about that you think is really important from an Indian point of view?
Well, the world's largest Muslim nation, the most populous Muslim nation, Indonesia, is going to the polls on February 14. And that election is going to tighten the hold of dynasties on politics. What we are seeing is something very unusual. The outgoing president is supporting not his own party's presidential candidate, but another guy, the defense minister, because the defense minister's running mate is the outgoing president's son. And the whole Constitution, the Constitution forbids anybody to run for presidentship or to be vice president candidate if the person is below 40. And yet, Indonesia's Constitution Court, headed by the outgoing president's brother-in-law, ruled controversially that the president's son was eligible to run as a running mate of the defense minister. So, the Indonesia election is a crazy one. Then we have Mexico, where both major sides have fielded women candidates. So Mexico will get its first woman president in June when the election is held.
All right. Thanks, Brahma. Thanks a lot. We'll keep coming back to you during the year as each of these elections happens and see what the impact is going to be on India and on the India story.
Thank you, Vikram. Bye.
Thanks, Brahma. Bye.